Ever since the remains of dinosaurs were properly described for the first time by paleontologists back in the 1800s, humans have claimed to have seen these great beasts not just as lifeless stone fossils, but in the flesh, alive and well, in the remote regions of the world. From a Ceratosaurus spotted in the Yukon Territory to plesiosaurs in Loch Ness, there has been no shortage of people claiming to have seen animals still living today, that all current scientific evidence indicates have been long dead for millions of years. As I have discussed in previous installments, the vast majority, if not all, of these late surviving cryptid sightings are more likely the product of misidentifications, hoaxes, and popular culture trends, rather than anything of substantial interest to paleontologists or biologists. As with most cryptids, these elusive monsters from another time leave no trace for their existence besides a few eyewitnesses. The Congo Basin in West Africa has, over the past century, become an epicenter of such purported creatures, and home to one of the most famous of them. To many Westerners, the remote interior of this hot and wet jungle region represents one of the final frontiers of our world. The massive Congo River drains out into the surrounding areas and feeds hundreds of smaller vassal rivers and streams. The dense and lush rainforests produced by these waterways, coupled with the political instability of the countries that encompass them, make proper documentation and exploration difficult for outsiders. Rare and elusive mammals like bonobos and okapi dwell in these regions, and it is claimed that countless other species are still yet to be discovered here, and no doubt there is some truth to this statement. But to hear some tell of it, dwelling in these murky swamps and rivers are some truly exceptional and bizarre creatures. Living dinosaurs. Foremost among them, the elephant-sized semi-aquatic Mokele-mbembe. Is there any truth to this claim? Well, you'll have to wait to find out, you impatient boyo, on this installment of Trade Explainer's Cryptid Profile, Mokele-mbembe, and the Lost Dinosaurs of the Congo. Some adherent believers claim that encounters with large, reptile-like monsters have long since been reported in Africa, even in ancient times. Some Greek and Roman historians mention the existence of dragons, griffins, giant ants, dog-faced men, and all kinds of living things living on the fringes of the known, civilized world, particularly south of Egypt. The Nile Mosaic of Palestrina is a Roman artwork dated to around 100 BCE in Italy, and depicts various scenes of people, places, and animals along the Great Nile River. Ethiopian warriors are shown fighting some more familiar African animals like crocodiles and hippos, but also less familiar ones like this Crocodilo pardalis, crocodile leopard. Ancient Egyptian artwork such as the Narmer Palet depicts two strange long-necked creatures apparently attempting to be tamed by humans. Cave artwork from Tanzania and Zambia supposedly shows sauropod-like creatures. However, the clearest and earliest documentation of actual sightings of dinosaur-like animals in Africa occurs in 1909, when German exotic animal dealer, showman, and big game hunter Carl Hagenbeck, well known for providing P.T. Barnum's circus with its steady supply of lions and other animals, published a book called Beasts and Men, which recounted his many adventures throughout Africa. One excerpt goes as follows. Some years ago I received reports of the existence of an immense and wholly unknown animal, said to inhabit the interior of Rhodesia. In the depths of the great swamps there dwelt a huge monster, half elephant, half dragon. It seems to me it can only be some kind of dinosaur, similarly akin to the Brontosaurus. The report was nothing more than a second or third-hand rumor Carl had allegedly heard from people he met on his travels in Rhodesia, modern-day Zimbabwe. Carl himself never claimed he actually saw such a creature. However, being a popular celebrity and an expert on foreign animals, many readers in the West took the claim made in his book very seriously, and at the time, no joke, it made headlines. The Washington Post reported, "Brontosaurus still lives." The Times of India reported, "Sea serpent of the forest." However, in Africa, the response to such claims was more skeptical. In 1919, the Uganda Herald responded to Carl's claim by saying, "There may be no truth whatsoever in the story, and probably there is not." The resident zoologist, employed by the Rhodesia Museum, who had actually traveled to the regions from which such stories of dinosaur-like creatures was said to originate from, openly scorned Carl's claim by stating, "It is curious that nothing has been heard of it before, through local native sources." Nonetheless, this initial report opened a floodgate of subsequent dinosaur sightings and legends all around Africa. German adventurer Paul Gretz wrote in 1911 that locals around Lake Bangwe-Yulu feared a large crocodile-like creature called the Nsanga, which was said to kill hippos. A degenerate saurian, which one might well confuse with the crocodile, were it not for its skin has no scales and its toes are armed with claws. In 1910, the Chicago Daily Tribune spoke to a Charles Brooks, who said he had talked to a tribe of pygmies in the Sahara Desert. These pygmies, according to Brooks, alleged to have seen great dinosaurs and giant humans living around giant oases in the middle of the desert itself. A brontosaurus-like creature was allegedly spotted in the Orange River in South Africa in 1921. Now, it should be noted that none of these reports were anywhere near the Congo, and were pretty much made just all over Africa willy-nilly, often mentioned alongside tales of giant dog-sized spiders, hairy Bigfoot-like wildmen, and Cyclops-like monsters. And it should be no surprise that many of these reports were admitted to be the product of hoaxing after the fact. Likely the actual first mention of a dinosaur-like cryptid living in the region near the Congo River Basin and the enigmatic Mokele-mbembe was made only in the 1940s through science writer and early cryptozoologist Willy Ley, who published a book titled Exotic Zoology. Mentioned alongside the Yeti and sea serpents, Ley references an old neglected manuscript written in 1913 by a German officer named, Ludwig Ferrer von Stein zu Litzensitz? Look, I'm just going to call him Ludwig. Ludwig was stationed in a German colony in what is now Cameroon, and went on several expeditions to record the land's interior. It was there that he heard stories of something called Mokele-mbembe. In Ley's 1941 book, he relays a translated version of Ludwig's descriptions. The animal is said to be a brownish-gray color with smooth skin. Its size is approximately that of an elephant. It is said to have a long and very flexible neck, and only one tooth, but a very long one. Some say it is a horn. A few spoke about a long, muscular tail like that of an alligator. Canoes coming near it are said to be doomed. The animal is said to attack the vessels at once and kill the crews without eating the bodies. The creature is said to live in the caves that have been washed out by the river. It is said to climb the shores even at daytime in search of food. Its diet is said to be entirely vegetable. Now, this description, although short and coming at best from a third-hand source, received great public attention in the burgeoning cryptozoology community of the 1950s and 60s, and was oft repeated in other books. Independent explorer James H. Powell Jr., along with biologist and Loch Ness Monster enthusiast Roy Mackal, were intrigued with the Mokele-mbembe story, and in 1980 they launched an expedition into the Republic of the Congo in an attempt to learn more about these reports and legends. In 1987, Mackal published his book, A Living Dinosaur, in search of Mokele-mbembe, recounting the two expeditions he embarked on to the Congo. Though Mackal never saw the creature, he supposedly collected many stories and folklore about it, and even eyewitness reports from the local peoples and isolated villages in the region. In Mackal's book, many different elusive beasts, not just the Mokele-mbembe, were beginning to creep out of the murky swamps of the river. There was the one-horned, this is going to be fun, Imala Netuku, Imala Netauku, the plank-backed Mubilu, and the snake or lizard-like predatory Nagama Monene. Not just one, but an entire ecosystem of monsters all supposedly inhabiting the same area. Countless expeditions by other Western adventure seekers followed suit and continued pretty steadily until the 2010s. Between 1980 and 2000, almost 20 expeditions searched unsuccessfully to find Mokele-mbembe, according to creationist William Gibbons, who participated in probably half of such visits. In 1992, a Japanese expedition supposedly recorded video evidence of a large and blurry shape swimming in Lake Tele. Other pieces of evidence on these trips have been recovered, such as footprints and sounds. Much hullabaloo, I legitimately cannot say this word. Much attention has been given to recorded interviews with locals, notably on the History Channel TV show Monster Quest. In such interviews, indigenous people are given a book filled with many images of different animals and a mock police lineup, and asked to identify which one was most like the Mokele-mbembe. The recording showed many choosing reconstructions of dinosaurs over more familiar animals like rhinos and elephants. More recent expeditions in the 2010s have been less promising. A documentary crew in 2016 spoke to some villagers who claimed that the Mokele-mbembe once existed, but is now extinct, the last members dying out at least a decade prior. A 2018 expedition, which brought a film crew and DNA scientists to Lake Tele, once again found no evidence of a dinosaur, but did discover an as-of-yet unknown species of green algae, so yay? As far as I'm aware, no further expeditions have been undertaken since. I think the website Genesis Park, I know, we'll get to this, was planning a 2020 expedition, but I've got a feeling that's been cancelled. Cracks in the story. Now, at first glance, all this evidence may lean strongly towards the idea that a large, sauropod-like dinosaur lives, or once lived, in the region around Lake Tele, and maybe even in other parts of Africa. However, I think when one puts on a more skeptical and scrupulous eye, many cracks start appearing in the Mokele-mbembe's story, until it completely shatters. And there's literally so much to get to, I don't even know where to start. I think we can clearly see the development of a myth in the monster's vague and murky origins, because, well, for one thing, there really is no record of Mokele-mbembe existing prior to the 20th century. Many of the ancient pre-colonial legends and artwork used by some to support the monster being older than the 1900s can easily be debunked. Some are obvious frauds of more recent invention, others are simply cases of mistaken identity. Those Zambian and Tanzanian cave drawings are very clearly supposed to be giraffes when you compare them with a larger sample size. Those long-necked monsters being restrained in Egyptian artwork are not dinosaurs, but serpopards, an entirely imaginary combination of a leopard with the neck of a snake. Such mythical, chimeric monsters are popular in mythology, especially in Egypt. Just look at the Sphinx. It does not mean such creatures really existed. The Roman mosaic depicting a so-called crocodile leopard can hardly be held up as reliable testimony, considering it was probably constructed by somebody who had never even been to the locations they describe, explaining many of the other inaccuracies in the image. I find it more likely that this image describes a known animal on the Nile, that the Romans just did not have a name for perhaps, maybe a river otter. And to add, the animal doesn't look much like a dinosaur. Similar legends and stories of monsters in pre-colonial African folklore are pretty vague and do not sound much like dinosaurs when you really break them down. In truth, the earliest reports of dinosaur-esque creatures alive in Africa's interior begin with Carl Hagenbeck's 1909 book reporting rumors of sauropods in Rhodesia. Though Carl claims these legends are old, this is highly doubtful. Westerners at the time who visited the very regions Carl cites report no such rumors. And considering he was hearing these rumors at best second or third hand, I'm inclined to believe he or his sources might have just made them up to make his book a little spicier and more interesting. Hey, Carl was a showman after all, and the year following the success of his book, he installed a big Brontosaurus statue in his zoo in Germany. The historical context around the publishing of Carl's book is also important to note. As pointed out by zoologist Darren Naish, Hagenbeck was almost certainly taking advantage of an early 20th century dinosaur craze that was sweeping the globe at the time. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, museums in America and Europe were mounting giant displays of fossil reconstructions of newly discovered dinosaurs, like Brontosaurus and Diplodocus. And this was the first time that the public really got to see these awe-inspiring and strange animals. As a result, dinosaurs, particularly the massive lumbering sauropods, captivated the public. And out of this period, we get a bunch of science fiction writers creating stories where dinosaurs are not extinct, but are still alive in the remote corners of the Earth, aka the Lost World genre. The idea of prehistoric dinosaurs still lingering around in our world, in some sweltering jungle, sounded plausible to the average reader at that time. And nowhere was such an idea more appealing than in the dark continent, Africa, with its bloodthirsty spear-wielding savages, who many racist white people at the time regarded as no more prehistoric themselves. Africa, as a whole, was seen by Westerners as a land stuck in the Stone Age, somehow more primitive and less evolutionarily developed than the other continents. Some of us might have even heard the still commonly repeated myth that Africa has scarcely changed since the time of the dinosaurs. This simply is not true. But such was the thinking from which these theories of living dinosaurs in Africa arose. And that's why dozens of people just claimed dinosaurs were everywhere in Africa, because Africa was seen as just this weird prehistoric and foreign place, where such things could happen. It's also very telling that these reports greatly resembled the inaccurate conception of sauropods at that time as slow, lazy swamp dwellers, an idea once held by 20th century paleontologists, but has been shown to be completely false by more modern ones, in accordance to new scientific evidence. The Mokele-mbembe and the placement of dinosaurs mentioned specifically near the Congo is similarly rather young. We first hear about it in 1941 through Willy Ley's Exotic Zoology, where he claims to be referencing an old German manuscript from 1913. But this has its own problems. Unlike with my arch-nemesis, the elusive E.L. Wallace, it seems like the German officer Ludwig was a real person and did conduct expeditions to Cameroon in the 1910s. But the old 1913 manuscript first mentioning Mokele-mbembe appears to be lost. As far as I can tell, nobody has been able to find evidence for this original manuscript's existence beyond the translated fragment in Ley's 1941 book, which is suspect. Where is it today? How do we know if Willy Ley translated it correctly? How do we even know he didn't just make it up? This is really important, as exotic zoology is where the name Mokele-mbembe and much of the information surrounding the cryptid originates from, or at least how this information first reached the West. It's where Roy Mackal and other cryptozoologists got the idea to go looking for dinosaurs in the Congo in the first place. And this is something you get repeatedly with these African dinosaur tales. You consistently hit these vague, dead ends when you try to track down the origins and primary sources of the stories. Oh, I heard it from a friend who heard it from an unnamed tribesman, or I read it and translated it from a report which is unfortunately now lost. It's all in the name. These weird fuzzy dead ends that have formed a lot of the mythology around the cryptid are perhaps best illustrated with the creature's name itself.
Mokele-mbembe.
Woof, I'm getting tired of saying that so much. What does it actually translate to in its original native language? Oh, it translates to one who stops the flow of rivers, you might say. But does it really though? Let me put on my tinfoil hat for a second. Ley's 1941 translation of Ludd's 1913 manuscript doesn't actually give a translation. He just says, "The natives named the creature Mokele-mbembe, but whether the name had any special meaning was uncertain." As far as records will allow, the first mention of the one who stops the flow of rivers as a translation for the words from Lingala to English is in 1982 by Herman Registers. He also gives two conflicting translations of the Imana Natuka from Bometaba into English as killer of elephants and eater of the tops of the palms. I have also heard an uncredited translation of Mokele-mbembe on the Cryptids and Myths wiki as he who divides the waters, which sounds suspiciously similar to a quote from the Bible. What is very curious is that Roy Mackal on his 1980 expedition to the Republic of Congo recounts a rather telling encounter with the President Kalonga of the Ipana district. During an interview about the monster, the district president, being more familiar with his own language, smiled at the words Mokele-mbembe, declaring that the word only meant rainbow, in his language Lingala. Upon hearing this, Mackal argued with him and told him he was wrong and seemingly quoted the passage from Exotic Zoology at him. We have heard several times over that Mokele-mbembe was killed. We have heard too that this Mokele-mbembe is very dangerous, although its food is strictly vegetable. If your people, or rather the pygmies at Lake Tele, are able to kill a rainbow with spears, and the rainbow eats fruit, we are very interested. It was only after this argument, and upon reflection, that the president of the district, changed his story the next day and recanted his statement that the word only meant rainbow. His demeanor towards Mokele-mbembe and the expedition changed completely, and he was able to find Mackal a whole bunch of informants who confirmed the dinosaur-esque description of the animal argued at him the day prior. In Mackal's reports, such shady dealings are not uncommon. On several occasions, local Africans deny knowing anything about Mokele-mbembe, or telling him that such a creature simply did not exist. Here we were, only a few kilometers from Lake Tele, where Mokele-mbembe had been killed, yet these villagers claimed to know nothing about it. Mackal often ignored these negative reports from locals and responded to them with a level of coercion, to say the least. Mackal, accompanied with his armed security team with AK-47s, would tell the locals what he knew about the creature, and then after passing them a beer would ask them to tell him the truth. Rather quickly, they would change their tune and give him the testimony he wanted. In one episode, it even seems like Mokele might have used medical supplies his team had brought for the Red Cross medics stationed in a village as a bargaining chip. It seems like prior to Mokele's excursion to the region, the word Mokele-mbembe might not have been a term used to refer to a dinosaur-like monster, but instead meant rainbow. Or maybe it meant nothing at all, and was just a bunch of gibberish in the Lingala language. It was only after Mokele's meddling, intentional or unintentional, that the definition shifted to something else entirely. It seems like it's one of those things that's been repeated over and over again to the point that everybody assumes it to be true, but nobody has actually taken the time to follow up on it. But perhaps I'm wrong. Lingala is a hard language to translate and is poorly understood. There are probably tons of regional and local variations of it throughout the Congo Basin. I will admit I'm no expert, and I feel like in this scenario we need a linguist to truly get to the bottom of this. This does lead me to my next talking point, though. Eyewitness tampering. A lot of attention and emphasis has been put on the reliability of local indigenous Africans for information on the Mokele-mbembe, and how these people would have no reason to lie or make up stuff.
What's so amazing about this is these people have nothing whatsoever to gain from telling stories because we don't pay them. They get no reward from us for doing this.
And as the narrator in Monster Quest states, they have virtually no contact with the outside world. Therefore, making their identification of dinosaurs in those lineup books, or being able to draw vaguely dinosaur-like images in the dirt, miraculous. This is just flat out wrong. Most of these people are not as backwater or primitive or uncontacted as reporters will often acknowledge. Many of them are fully aware of what a dinosaur is and looks like, not from the jungle, mind you, but from movies, books, and comics that have been disseminating across Africa for almost a century, even in the most remote of villages. As cryptozoologist William Gibbons admits, in 2003, while conducting the famous lineup test in an isolated Congo village, a man immediately picked out a picture of a diplodocus and said, "Brontosaurus," without hesitation. When a somewhat taken aback Gibbons asked him how he learned that word, the man simply said he saw it on TV. Clearly not as uncontacted as one would initially be led to believe. These very same lineup tests also do not always give the desired result. For example, in 2001, for the BBC TV documentary series Congo, a group of pygmies were interviewed. They identified a rhinoceros, not a dinosaur, as the Mokele-mbembe. In 1989, in another interview, local people claimed the creature was a spirit, and not an actual living animal. It seems like the wrong answers, sometimes given by villagers, are downplayed or edited out to better support the dinosaur narrative. The fact many of these same villages are revisited over and over again, year after year, has allowed these locals to refine their stories for the visitors. The so-called convincing drawings by natives are also not really impressive when you look at them more closely, and recognize that these communities have had a sizable amount of contact with popular culture, as well as the repeated visits from outsiders bringing dinosaur illustrations. It is very curious that certain aspects of the original story, such as Mokele-mbembe having a very long tooth or horn, a thing no known sauropod had, has been outright removed from much later retellings. To respond to the claim that these locals get nothing for their testimony, and therefore have no reason to lie, this is again false. In 1989, the son of a village elder was asked by a visiting British writer why people in his village swore they saw a dinosaur. The man responded with this: "Don't you know? It's to bring idiots like you here and make a lot of money." Of course they pay them. If not directly for their testimony, these interviewers pay for translators, lodging, food, local guides, and permission to sacred areas, sometimes a lot of money in the thousands of dollars. And again, year after year, many of these locals have learned that the best way to keep these gullible rich white folks coming back is to tell them what they want to hear. They're not stupid. These people wouldn't visit their village if it weren't for the monster. It's tourism, and it really helps fuel the local economies of these small communities. These locals have a vested interest in keeping the legend alive. And Western visitors have been noting this for half a century, albeit in a more racist manner, from Lay's Exotic Zoology. The natives, wishing to please the white visitor and hoping for a valuable gift at the same time, are only too ready to assert they know of an animal in their territory with blue skin, 6 legs, 1 eye, and 4 tusks. The size is entirely up to the questioner. The native will tell him what he thinks the white man wants to hear. Most eyewitness accounts are pretty much nothing more than hearsay, sometimes handed down from generation to generation. "Oh, my grandpa saw it once when he was a kid and told me about it before he died." It is just so dang hard to get to the heart of these monsters because they appear to have been tainted, or corrupted so to speak, by over 100 years of Western tourists who may have been influencing them to fit a certain preferred narrative. After decades of this repeated interference, the oral traditions and folk memory of these locals has doubtlessly been warped and twisted to a certain extent. Who really knows what Mokele-mbembe meant, or even was, before Mackle came in the 1980s and muddied the waters? Maybe the name once referred to a water spirit, or maybe a rhino, or maybe even a rainbow. But, because of a whole bunch of outsiders bringing money, the word became to mean something else entirely. Maybe. And I think this is now a good time for me to really acknowledge the big elephant in the room when it comes to Mokele-mbembe. When one reads up on the Mokele-mbembe, one starts to begin to find a common theme amongst a lot of its researchers and experts, especially in more recent times. How do I put this? They're all a bunch of weirdos, and worse, unqualified weirdos. I've mentioned William Gibbons, who sometimes goes by Dr. Bill Gibbons, and boasts several degrees. Now, he's not a scientist, as Monster Quest refers to him. His degrees are in cultural anthropology and religious education, and upon closer inspection hold little to no academic weight, coming from admittedly not the most respectable, some may say sketchy, institutions. Religious education, you say? That's kind of weird for a guy who is supposed to study dinosaurs or animals for a living. Shouldn't he be a zoologist or something? And then you check out some of the books he's published and realize, apart from maybe being a closeted scaly, oh no, is this like a religious thing? Yep, Gibbons, along with several other researchers, belong to a rather interesting sect of Christianity called Young Earth Creationists, who I've talked about before. To give you the rundown, they believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible, and in particular, the book of Genesis. The theory of evolution is a fraud, the Earth is 4,000 years old, not billions. There was a global flood with Noah's Ark, and lastly, humans, dinosaurs, and all kinds of prehistoric animals once coexisted like in the Flintstones, up until recently. And boy, if you ever get a chance to check out some creationist writings and websites, it's a rabbit hole of craziness, often discussing in length elaborate government and global academic conspiracies to explain the lack of evidence to support their beliefs. It's a realm of low-quality JPEGs and poorly photoshopped giant skeletons, often connected with other online conspiracy theory communities like Ancient Aliens and all that. And these creationists love, and I mean love, Mokele-mbembe. They bring it up all the time, from Ken Ham.
Mokele-mbembe, what on earth is it?
To Kent Hovind, formerly inmate 06452-017.
They also talked about an animal called Mokele-mbembe. Mokele-mbembe.
Two random YouTubers I probably watched 10 years ago.
The hepatosaur that was identified by natives has the name Mokele-mbembe.
And this would be fine if not for the fact that many of them believe that if they prove Mokele-mbembe's existence, their beliefs will be validated, evolution by natural selection and mainstream paleontology will be entirely disproved, and their young Earth creationist version of Christianity will spread to the masses as a result.
I call dinosaurs missionary lizards.
And make no mistake, many of the exact same expeditions to the Congo to find Mokele-mbembe have the double purpose of being missionary trips to convert the local peoples to Christianity, and are often financed by, you guessed it, other creationists. Pretty much all these guys are unqualified amateurs with no backgrounds in science whatsoever, despite their doctorates, which come from such universities as the prestigious Patriot U. They have a vested interest in proving the dinosaur angle, and are quite open about their ulterior motives and biases. They don't want to hear that Mokele-mbembe is a water spirit or a rhino. They want it to be a dinosaur. There is essentially a whole genre where these religious folks come in and seize on any vague rumors of living dinosaurs or prehistoric creatures in poorer, undeveloped countries all over the world. I have already talked about an extremely similar situation with creationist Jonathan Whitcomb's Ropin in Papua New Guinea. As pointed out by geologist and paleontologist Donald Prothero, many expeditions do little more than arrive and turn around, each burning several $1,000s in the process. No better was this illustrated than in Monster Quest's 2009 documentary following Bill Gibbons. These expeditions and their leaders are super wimpy, often giving up at first sight of difficulty. The amount of times this guy allegedly hot on the trail of this monster says, "Oh well, it's getting late, it's kinda hot out here, let's go in for lunch," is amazing. Gibbons' team, according to him, supposedly cast out demons from villagers between looking for the big lumbering dinosaurs in the area. In short, it's a bunch of suburban white dudes who are all Indiana Jones wannabes on a tropical vacation. never really getting any closer to catching the dinosaur they have been supposedly searching for over
3 decades.
The plaster footprints taken on one of these expeditions has been looked at by actual paleontologists who have easily debunked them as not looking anything like a sauropod track, or any dinosaur track for that matter, and more likely just being random natural impressions in the dirt. The Japanese aerial video taken in 1992 is super blurry and the shape can literally be anything. Odds are it's probably just a canoe with people in it. It's really mind-boggling that, after all this time, these guys have found absolutely nothing of substantial evidence. The Mokele-mbembe story, along with the stories of countless other African living dinosaurs, is built on nothing more than lies. Really, when you break it down and strip away the fancy descriptions and artwork, you're left with nothing but hearsay and rumor that, when investigated further, leads you to a bunch of dead ends. It is my belief that Mokele-mbembe is a cryptid that was not spotted or seen emerging from a murky river bottom, but was created by Westerners. Essentially starting from stories told by crafty jokesters trying to exploit the dinomania craze of the early 1900s, and then through repeated visits by Westerners to Africa, who projected their own views and narratives onto the native people. It's a myth constructed by white tourists, and then perpetuated by locals. It's part of this bizarre, self-fulfilling loop or cycle. Wait, it's all lies. Always has been. There's little to no evidence that Mokele-mbembe even existed prior to the 1900s. There might have been some original grain of truth to this story back in the day, but it has since been lost due to the warping of outside influences to the point we can't really tell what this grain of truth originally was before this interference. Such is the trouble with oral traditions. You'd expect, if there really was a population of large dinosaurs out there in the jungle, where are they hiding? Why is there no evidence for them? You'd think with the illegal pet and animal trade, as well as the prevalence of warlords and gangs with AK-47s in the region, some bones or scales or something would have turned up by now, on the black market or in a trophy collection somewhere. Similar things have happened to much smaller and more elusive species. But no, after nearly a century, we still got nothing. The world might have been large and mysterious in 1909 or 1941, but it's 2020. The world is so much smaller, and our technology and understanding of it better. If there was a Mokele-mbembe, and I'm not sure there was, it would likely be more some kind of unknown lizard or fish or mammal species than a dinosaur, really. I think it's a bit of a jump to just shout out, oh, it has to be a brontosaurus, or it has to be a stegosaurus, based on the vaguest of details. The Congo Basin is home to many species endangered by human activity, and I do not doubt there is still much to be identified by science in this region. However, I think wasting any more thought on finding a Mokele-mbembe or some other kind of living dinosaur is a fool's errand. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Trey the Explainer. I did a lot of research for this one, and read a whole bunch of books, some way better than others, and watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos and TV shows, so I truly hope you enjoyed the level of research that went into this one. I would like to thank fellow YouTuber and amazing animator Worthy Kids for providing some adorable dino depictions for this video. Thank you so much, man, you're awesome. As well as paleo artist Ashley Patch, who made the thumbnail for this video. You're awesome as well. Links to these artists in the description. Hope you enjoy my next deep dive. Alright, bye! If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to, do it. Want to change the world, there's nothing to it.